Welcome back to another episode of Infidelity Tales Lab. We're thankful for your continued viewership. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? We love knowing our global reach. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Perfect Facade. Victor Holt adjusted his tie in the hallway mirror, the same routine he'd followed for 8 years of marriage. To anyone watching, he was the epitome of suburban success, a quiet, methodical man who worked in private security consulting. His neighbors in the affluent Riverside district knew him as the devoted husband who never missed his daughter Emma's soccer games, the man who grilled on weekends and maintained the most pristine lawn on Maple Street. What they didn't know was that Victor's consulting work involved extracting information from people who preferred to keep secrets buried. His military background in psychological operations had translated seamlessly into civilian life, though he'd never shared those details with Rebecca, his wife of 12 years. She believed he'd been a desk analyst, nothing more. The morning sunlight filtered through their colonial home's windows as Victor prepared for another day of maintaining his carefully constructed life. Rebecca descended the stairs, her auburn hair cascading over her silk blouse, looking every inch the successful real estate agent she'd become. At 34, she'd retained the beauty that had first caught his attention at a college party, but something in her green eyes had shifted over the past 6 months. "Coffee's ready," she said, not meeting his gaze as she gathered her files from the kitchen counter. "Thank you." Victor studied her movements, noting the slight tremor in her hands, the way she avoided physical contact. His training had taught him to read micro-expressions, and Rebecca was broadcasting guilt like a radio tower. 14-year-old Emma bounded into the kitchen, her dark hair, Victor's hair, pulled back in a ponytail. "Dad, can you pick me up from practice today? Mom has that late showing." "Of course, sweetheart." Victor kissed the top of her head, watching Rebecca's face carefully. Another lie. Rebecca had no showings scheduled for the evening. He checked her company's system 2 weeks ago when his suspicions first crystallized. After Rebecca left with a hurried goodbye and Emma caught her bus, Victor made his own departure. But instead of heading to his downtown office, he drove to a residential street 3 miles away and parked across from a modest townhouse. Trevor Mills emerged right on schedule, locking his door and walking to his silver sedan. Victor had been conducting surveillance for 2 weeks now, documenting Trevor's routine with military precision. The man was Rebecca's age, divorced, and worked as a marketing director for a boutique firm. What made him interesting wasn't his unremarkable career or his average looks. It was how Rebecca's Tuesday and Thursday late showings coincided perfectly with Trevor's early departures from work. Trevor Mills was everything Victor wasn't. Talkative, expressive, the kind of man who wore his emotions on his sleeve. Victor had watched them together through telephoto lenses, seen the way Rebecca laughed at Trevor's jokes, touched his arm, looked at him the way she used to look at Victor before familiarity bred contempt. Victor's phone buzzed with a text from his actual work. A client needed information extracted from a former business partner suspected of selling trade secrets. It was the kind of job that required psychological pressure, patient manipulation, and ultimately complete psychological breakdown of the target. Victor excelled at such work. As he drove toward downtown, Victor began formulating a different kind of extraction. Rebecca and Trevor had committed the ultimate betrayal, and betrayal, in Victor's worldview, demanded consequences. Not divorce court consequences or emotional confrontations. Real consequences that would teach them what happened when someone made the mistake of deceiving a man like Victor Holt. The plan began forming in his mind as he walked into his sparse office building. Rebecca thought she was clever, conducting her affair while maintaining the facade of their marriage. Trevor probably felt like he was stealing something precious from an unsuspecting husband. They both believed Victor was weak, oblivious, someone they could manipulate and deceive. They had no idea that their greatest mistake wasn't the affair itself. It was choosing to betray a man whose profession was destroying people who try to hide their secrets. Chapter 2. Buried Histories. Victor's office occupied the 15th floor of a downtown high-rise, deliberately unremarkable except for its state-of-the-art security system. His legitimate consulting work provided excellent cover for the more specialized services he offered to clients who needed problems to disappear permanently. The military hadn't just trained him in psychological operations. They'd shaped him into something far more dangerous than Rebecca could imagine. His secretary, Linda Kowalski, was a 60-year-old former CIA analyst who understood the importance of discretion. She handed him a thick file as he entered. "Your 3 p.m. appointment confirmed," she said. "Background materials are complete." Victor nodded, but his mind wasn't on business. He was thinking about Rebecca's history, details she'd shared during their courtship that now took on sinister significance. She'd grown up in foster care after her parents died in a car accident when she was 8. No extended family, no deep roots, perfect for someone who might need to disappear. Her ambition had always impressed him. Now he wondered if it masked something more calculated. The phone rang. Rebecca's voice, artificially sweet. "Honey, I'll be late again tonight. The Patterson showing is running long." "Of course it is," Victor replied, making notes on a pad. The Pattersons had closed on their house 2 weeks ago. "Don't wait up." After hanging up, Victor accessed his private files and pulled Rebecca's complete background check from before their marriage. He'd been thorough then, but not suspicious. Now, he studied it with professional interest. Rebecca had briefly attended college with someone named Trevor Mills before transferring schools. They'd known each other for 15 years, not the few months she'd claimed when she mentioned him in passing. Victor's training had taught him that people rarely committed betrayal on impulse. This affair had been orchestrated, planned, possibly from the moment Trevor reappeared in their city 18 months ago. Rebecca hadn't fallen into temptation. She deliberately sought it out. His next call was to Marcus Delacroix, a former military colleague who now ran security for the city's police department. Marcus owed Victor several favors from their overseas work together. "I need a comprehensive background on someone," Victor said when Marcus answered. "Trevor Mills, marketing director at Pinnacle Creative. Personal or professional?" "Both." "And Marcus, dig deep. I want to know what he doesn't want people to know." Within hours, Marcus had provided a complete dossier. Trevor Mills wasn't just Rebecca's former college acquaintance. He was her former boyfriend. They dated for 2 years before she transferred schools, supposedly to focus on her real estate studies. But academic records showed she'd been suspended for cheating on exams, using Trevor as her source for stolen test materials. More interesting was Trevor's recent history. His divorce hadn't been amicable. His ex-wife had accused him of psychological manipulation and financial deception. Court records detailed a pattern of behavior. Trevor would identify married women with successful husbands, seduce them, then gradually extract financial information and emotional dependency before moving on to the next target. Rebecca wasn't Trevor's victim. She was his accomplice. Victor felt the familiar coldness settle over him, the same emotional shutdown that had served him well in interrogation rooms and combat zones. This wasn't just adultery. It was a calculated assault on his life, his family, his carefully constructed world. Rebecca and Trevor had looked at his success, his stability, and decided to take what they wanted while destroying what they couldn't have. That evening, Emma returned from soccer practice full of excitement about an upcoming tournament. Victor helped her with homework, made dinner, and maintained a routine of normalcy while mentally cataloging every asset, every vulnerability, every pressure point in Rebecca and Trevor's lives. When Rebecca finally came home at 11 p.m., her hair slightly mussed and her lipstick gone, Victor was waiting in his study. "How was the showing?" he asked without looking up from his book. "Challenging. The buyers are very particular." Rebecca's voice carried a note of nervous energy, the adrenaline of deception poorly concealed. "I'm sure they are." Victor closed his book and studied his wife's face. 12 years of marriage, and he'd never truly seen her until now. "Rebecca, do you remember when we first met? You told me you'd never lie to me." Something flickered in her eyes, fear, perhaps, or guilt. "Of course I remember. Why would you bring that up?" "Just thinking about promises," Victor said, rising from his chair. "And what happens when people break them?" Rebecca started to respond, then seemed to think better of it. She muttered something about being tired and headed upstairs, leaving Victor alone with his thoughts and his plans. The game had begun, but Rebecca and Trevor didn't know they were playing yet. Soon, they would learn what happened when someone tried to deceive a man whose life's work was destroying people foolish enough to think they could outsmart him. Chapter 3. The Network Titans. 3 weeks into his investigation, Victor had transformed his home office into a war room. Hidden cameras provided complete surveillance of their house, Trevor's townhouse, and the hotel where they conducted their trysts. Audio devices captured their conversations, their plans, their casual discussions about Victor's predictable schedule and trusting nature. What emerged from the surveillance painted a picture far more sinister than simple adultery. Rebecca and Trevor had been planning for months to manipulate Victor into a position where Rebecca could claim half his assets in a divorce, plus alimony and child support. They'd researched his business dealings, looking for anything they could use against him. Trevor had even suggested ways to trigger Victor's supposed anger issues to strengthen Rebecca's case. They had no idea that Victor's legitimate business was worth far less than his illegitimate operations, or that documenting their conspiracy was child's play for someone with the skills. The turning point came on a Thursday evening when Victor followed Rebecca to Trevor's townhouse. Through high-powered surveillance equipment, he watched them in Trevor's living room, planning their next moves with the casual cruelty of predators discussing prey. "He's so fucking naive," Trevor laughed, pulling Rebecca closer on his couch. "Yesterday, he actually thanked me for being such a good friend to you during your stressful time at work." Rebecca smiled, but Victor detected something forced in her expression. "Sometimes I feel bad about Emma. She really loves him." "Kids are resilient," Trevor replied, his hand moving to Rebecca's thigh. "She'll be fine. Besides, the custody arrangement means you get his money and he gets weekend visits. Best of both worlds. What if he fights it?" "With what?" "You've been documenting his emotional distance for months. His work schedule, his focus on business over family. Any judge will see you the better parent. Plus, if he gets difficult, we can always suggest he's been psychologically abusive. Your word against his." Victor felt the familiar calm that preceded violence, the emotional stillness that had made him effective in situations where other men would lose control. Rebecca and Trevor weren't just betraying him. They were conspiring to destroy his relationship with Emma, the one pure thing in his life. That night, after Rebecca returned home with her usual lies about late showings, Victor made his first move. He placed a call to an old contact in military intelligence, a man who specialized in creating untraceable documentation and digital breadcrumbs. "I need a ghost," Victor said when the connection secured. "Someone with a history of stalking, assault, domestic violence. Someone scary enough to make 2 targets believe they're in real danger." "How real do you want the danger to feel?" "Real enough that they'll call the police. Real enough that they'll trust me to protect them." Within 48 hours, Victor had a complete identity. Danny Torino, a supposedly violent ex-convict with a history of stalking married women and attacking their lovers. Danny's criminal record was perfectly crafted, his psychological profile suggesting an escalating pattern of violence that would terrify anyone who discovered they were his target. The beauty of the plan was its simplicity. Rebecca and Trevor would soon discover that Danny Torino was following them, threatening them, watching their every move. They would be so grateful when Victor, with his security consulting expertise, offered to help protect them from this dangerous stranger. They would never suspect that Danny Torino was a fiction, that every threat, every dangerous encounter, every reason to fear was orchestrated by the man they betrayed. Victor spent the weekend with Emma, taking her to movies and buying her new soccer equipment, creating memories that would matter when the inevitable custody battle began. She was everything good in his life, and he would protect her from the destruction he was about to unleash. On Monday morning, as Rebecca prepared for another late showing and Emma left for school, Victor activated Phase 1 of his plan. Trevor Mills was about to discover that some prey fought back, and Rebecca was about to learn that her devoted husband was something far more dangerous than the naive fool she'd taken him for. The war room was complete, the battlefield chosen. Now it was time to introduce Rebecca and Trevor to Danny Torino, and through him, to consequences they'd never imagined possible. Chapter 4. The Ghost Emerges. Danny Torino's first appearance was subtle, a shadow at the edge of Trevor's peripheral vision as he left work Tuesday evening. Victor, positioned 2 blocks away with professional surveillance equipment, watched Trevor pause uncertainly before continuing to his car. The seed of paranoia had been planted. 3 days later, Trevor found his apartment building's mailbox area vandalized, with one specific message spray-painted in red: "I'm watching you, Trevor." The building's security cameras had mysteriously malfunctioned that night, a simple matter for someone with Victor's technical skills. Rebecca noticed Trevor's growing nervousness during their Thursday rendezvous. Victor listened through surveillance equipment as Trevor explained about the strange incidents, the feeling of being watched, the vandalism. "Maybe it's just random," Rebecca suggested, but her voice carried new tension. "It felt personal," Trevor replied. "Like someone knows my name, my routine." Victor allowed a week to pass before escalating. Danny Torino's next appearance was more direct. A photograph slipped under Trevor's apartment door, showing Trevor and Rebecca entering the hotel they favored. On the back, in block letters, "Cheaters always pay." This time, Trevor called the police. Victor monitored the police frequency, listening as Detective Angela Santos took Trevor's statement about potential stalking. Trevor described the incidents as harassment from an unknown source, possibly connected to his recent divorce. Victor's law enforcement contacts ensured Detective Santos received an anonymous tip about Danny Torino's release from prison and his pattern of targeting adulterous couples. The fictional criminal record was detailed enough to convince any investigator that Trevor and Rebecca had attracted the attention of a genuinely dangerous predator. Detective Santos advised Trevor to avoid patterns, vary his routine, and notify police immediately of any further contact. She also suggested he inform any romantic partners about the potential threat. That evening, Trevor called Rebecca with the news. Victor listened from his home office as Rebecca's voice pitched higher with each detail. "A stalker? Trevor, this is serious. What does he want?" "I don't know. The detective says this guy has a history of escalating behavior. Physical assault, property damage. Rebecca, maybe we should cool things for a while." "No." Rebecca's response surprised both Trevor and Victor. "We're not letting some psychopath control our lives. But maybe I should tell Victor. He has security experience. Maybe he could help." Victor smiled at the irony. Rebecca was about to invite him into the very conspiracy she'd been conducting behind his back. The next evening, Rebecca approached Victor with carefully rehearsed concern. "Honey, I need to tell you something. My friend Trevor is being stalked by some ex-convict. He's scared, and I'm worried about Emma's safety if this person finds out Trevor and I are friends." "What kind of stalking?" Victor asked, his voice perfectly modulated to suggest professional interest rather than personal suspicion. Rebecca provided details, emphasizing Trevor's fear and her own concern about this dangerous criminal who might target anyone associated with Trevor. She asked if Victor could provide security advice, possibly meet with Trevor to assess the threat. "Of course," Victor replied. "I'll call him tomorrow. We can't have you and Emma at risk because of some unhinged criminal." That night, Victor refined the next phase of his plan. Soon, he would meet Trevor face to face, not as the betrayed husband he actually was, but as the security expert whose help they desperately needed. He would guide them deeper into paranoia while positioning himself as their protector. The irony was exquisite. Rebecca and Trevor would soon trust their lives to the very man they conspired to destroy, never realizing that their greatest threat wasn't Danny Torino. It was Victor Holt himself. Danny Torino was just getting started, and his next visit would convince Rebecca and Trevor that they needed protection only Victor could provide. The trap was almost complete. Soon it would be time to spring it. Chapter 5. The Protector's Gambit. Victor's first meeting with Trevor took place at a downtown coffee shop, chosen specifically for its multiple exit points and extensive surveillance blind spots. Trevor arrived 15 minutes early, clearly nervous, checking over his shoulder and jumping at sudden sounds. Victor entered precisely on time, observing Trevor's heightened anxiety with professional interest. "You must be Trevor," Victor said, extending his hand with the confident grip of someone accustomed to command. "Rebecca told me about your situation. I'm sorry you're dealing with this." Trevor's relief was visible. "Thank you for meeting me. I know you don't really know me, but Rebecca speaks so highly of you. She says you're the best security consultant in the city." "I try to help when I can," Victor replied, settling into his chair with the relaxed posture of someone comfortable with violence. "Tell me about these incidents, starting from the beginning." For the next hour, Victor led Trevor through a detailed recounting of Danny Torino's harassment campaign. He took careful notes, asked probing questions about timing and methodology, and gradually built Trevor's confidence that he was speaking with someone who understood predatory behavior. "This pattern is textbook escalation," Victor concluded, tapping his pen against his notepad. "Your stalker is testing boundaries, building psychological pressure before moving to direct confrontation. The fact that he knows about Rebecca suggests he's been conducting extended surveillance." Trevor's face paled. "What kind of direct confrontation?" "Physical assault, property destruction, potentially targeting family members or romantic partners. Men like this," Victor paused, letting the implication settle. "They don't stop until they're stopped. What do you recommend?" Victor leaned forward, his voice dropping to the confidential tone he'd perfected during interrogations. "First, we need to document everything for law enforcement. Second, we need to control the variables he might exploit. Third, we need to be prepared for him to escalate." Trevor nodded eagerly. "Whatever it takes. Rebecca's scared, and I can't live looking over my shoulder forever. I'll need to meet with Rebecca, get her perspective on the timeline. This stalker might have been watching both of you longer than you realize. Can you arrange that?" "Of course. Tonight, if possible." Trevor caught himself. "She has a late showing, but afterward we could meet." Victor made a note, as if recording Trevor's scheduling information rather than catching his near confession about their planned rendezvous. "Perfect. And Trevor, don't vary your routine too dramatically. Sudden changes might trigger him to act more aggressively. Maintain normal patterns, but stay alert." That evening, Victor arrived at the designated restaurant where Trevor and Rebecca were waiting. Watching Rebecca interact with Trevor in person, seeing her touch his arm and lean close during conversation, confirmed every detail of his surveillance. But now she was performing a different role, the concerned friend seeking help for her stalking victim. "Victor, thank God you're here," Rebecca said, standing to embrace him with what appeared to be genuine relief. "This whole situation has me terrified for Emma's safety." Victor's analysis of Rebecca's performance was professionally impressed. She'd crafted a narrative that positioned her relationship with Trevor as innocent friendship, while expressing realistic concern about the threat to their family. If he hadn't known the truth, he might have believed her completely. "Rebecca, I need you to think carefully about anyone who might have seen you with Trevor," Victor said, settling into his chair. "Coffee shops, restaurants, business meetings. This stalker has to be getting his information somewhere." For an hour, Victor guided them through a detailed recreation of their activities over the past month. Under the guise of security analysis, he extracted a complete timeline of their affair while positioning himself as their protector and confidant. "Based on what you've told me," Victor concluded, "this stalker has been watching you for at least 6 weeks. He knows your routines, your meeting places, possibly your home addresses. We need to assume he's planning something significant." "What kind of something?" Rebecca asked. "Home invasion, workplace confrontation, or targeting family members. Men like Danny Torino view adultery as a personal affront requiring punishment." Trevor started. "How did you know his name?" Victor smiled slightly. "I made some calls after our meeting. Danny Torino, 34, recently released from Millfield Correctional. History of assault, stalking, domestic violence. He fits the profile perfectly." Rebecca grabbed Victor's hand. "What do we do?" "You trust me to handle it," Victor replied, his voice carrying absolute certainty. "I'm going to set up protection protocols for both of you. Round-the-clock surveillance, controlled communication channels, and, if necessary, direct intervention." Trevor looked confused. "Direct intervention?" Sometimes the only way to stop a predator is to remove him from the equation permanently, Victor said, meeting Trevor's eyes with the cold gaze that had broken stronger men than him. Don't worry. I know how to handle men like Danny Torino. As they prepared to leave, Rebecca kissed Victor's cheek with what appeared to be genuine gratitude. I'm so lucky to have you protecting us. Victor smiled, returning her embrace while mentally cataloging every detail of her deception. Soon, Rebecca and Trevor would learn exactly what kind of protection he provided to people who betrayed him. Chapter 6. The Reckoning begins. Danny Torino's escalation came exactly 1 week later, perfectly timed to shatter any remaining sense of security Trevor and Rebecca might have retained. Victor orchestrated it with the precision of his military training, creating maximum psychological impact while maintaining his role as their protector. The attack began at 2 a.m. when Trevor's apartment building fire alarm triggered, forcing all residents to evacuate. As Trevor stood in the parking lot with his neighbors, he discovered his car windows smashed and a message etched into the paint. Time's up. Victor arrived 20 minutes after Trevor's panicked phone call, having been monitoring police frequencies for any incidents involving his clients. He surveyed the damage with professional calm, while Trevor shook with genuine terror. This is escalation, Victor announced to the police officers taking the report. Classic stalker behavior, demonstrating capability while maintaining psychological distance. He's telling Trevor he can reach him anywhere, anytime. Detective Santos nodded grimly. Mr. Holt, you mentioned you have military experience with this type of threat assessment? 15 years in psychological operations, Victor replied, the lie flowing smoothly. I've seen this pattern in domestic terror cases. The subject is building toward a direct confrontation. Trevor grabbed Victor's arm. What does that mean? It means he's done playing games, Victor said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. Within the next few days, Danny Torino is going to make his move. We need to be ready. The next morning brought crisis for Rebecca. She arrived at her real estate office to find her desk vandalized, files scattered, and a photograph of her and Trevor taped to her computer monitor. Across the photo, in red marker, whore. Rebecca's call to Victor was hysterical. He was in my office. He knows where I work. He has pictures of us. Victor, I'm scared. Come home immediately, Victor instructed. Don't stop anywhere. Don't talk to anyone. I'm implementing emergency protocols. By evening, Victor had transformed their house into what appeared to be a fortress. Security cameras, motion sensors, reinforced locks, all genuine equipment from his professional arsenal. Emma, told that Daddy was helping protect a friend from a bad man, accepted the increased security as an exciting adventure. Rebecca and Trevor, however, were rapidly approaching psychological breakdown. The carefully orchestrated campaign of terror had convinced them they were being hunted by a violent predator who could strike at any moment. Maybe we should go to the police, tell them everything, Trevor suggested during an evening strategy session in Victor's home office. Tell them what? Victor asked. That you're having an affair and it attracted a stalker? That doesn't change the threat level, and it might complicate the investigation. Rebecca shot Trevor a warning look. Victor's right. We just need to trust his expertise until this is over. Victor studied his wife's face, noting the stress lines, the dark circles under her eyes, the nervous energy that had replaced her usual confident demeanor. The psychological pressure was working exactly as planned. There is one option, Victor said slowly, as if the idea was just occurring to him. I could arrange a direct meeting with Torino. Draw him into a controlled environment where we can end this permanently. What do you mean, permanently? Trevor asked. Victor's smile was barely perceptible. I mean, we eliminate the threat. Permanently. Rebecca stared at her husband with new recognition, seeing something in his eyes she'd never noticed before. Victor, you're not talking about. I'm talking about protecting my family, Victor interrupted, his voice carrying an edge that made both Rebecca and Trevor fall silent. Men like Danny Torino understand only one language. I speak that language fluently. Trevor shifted uncomfortably. Maybe we should think about this. There's nothing to think about, Victor said, rising from his chair with the fluid movement of a predator. Torino made his choice when he decided to threaten the people I care about. Now he has to live with the consequences. The room fell silent as Rebecca and Trevor absorbed the implications of Victor's words. They were beginning to understand that their mild-mannered protector might be more dangerous than the threat he was supposedly protecting them from. But it was too late for second thoughts. Danny Torino had one more visit to make, and this time, the confrontation would be face-to-face. Victor's trap was complete. Soon, Rebecca and Trevor would learn exactly what kind of man they'd chosen to betray. Chapter 7. The Final Move. The trap snapped shut on a rain-soaked Thursday evening when Danny Torino made his boldest move yet. Victor had spent weeks conditioning Rebecca and Trevor to expect escalation, and now he would deliver exactly what he'd promised, a direct confrontation that would reveal the truth about everything. At 8 p.m., as Rebecca and Trevor huddled in Victor's house under his protection, the security system triggered an alarm. Motion sensors detected movement in the backyard, and surveillance cameras captured a figure moving through the shadows toward the house. "He's here," Victor announced with cold certainty, studying the monitor feeds. Danny Torino just made his final mistake. Trevor grabbed Rebecca's hand as they watched Victor transform before their eyes. The mild-mannered security consultant disappeared, replaced by something far more dangerous. Victor moved with military precision, checking weapons they hadn't known he possessed, activating communication systems that seemed far too sophisticated for civilian use. "Stay in the safe room," Victor instructed, indicating a reinforced interior office. "No matter what you hear, don't come out until I give the all-clear." "Victor, maybe we should call the police," Rebecca suggested, her voice shaking. "The police can't handle this," Victor replied, his tone suggesting intimate familiarity with violence. "But I can." As Rebecca and Trevor locked themselves in the safe room, Victor prepared for the performance of his life. Through hidden speakers, he would give them a show they'd never forget, and in the process destroy their relationship forever. The first sounds they heard were muffled voices, too distant to understand clearly. Then came what sounded like a struggle, furniture crashing, someone shouting threats in a rough voice they didn't recognize. "Where are they?" Danny Torino's voice echoed through the house, distorted but audible. "I know they're here." Victor's voice responded, calm and professional. "You made a mistake coming here, Torino. This ends now." What followed was the carefully orchestrated sound of combat. Impacts, grunts of effort, the crash of breaking objects. Rebecca and Trevor pressed against the safe room door, listening in terror as their protector battled their stalker. The climax came with a final series of impacts, followed by silence. Then Victor's voice, slightly breathless, "It's over. He won't be bothering anyone anymore." When Victor finally opened the safe room door, his clothes were disheveled, and he had what appeared to be fresh bruises on his face. Behind him, the living room showed signs of struggle. Overturned furniture, broken objects, evidence of violence. "Where is he?" Trevor asked, scanning the room nervously. "Gone," Victor replied. "He won't be coming back." Rebecca stared at her husband with new understanding. "Victor, what did you do?" "I protected my family," Victor said, his voice carrying finality. Danny Torino is no longer a threat to anyone. The implications of Victor's words settled over Rebecca and Trevor like a shroud. They were beginning to realize that their mild-mannered protector had capabilities they'd never imagined, and had possibly just committed murder to protect them. But Victor wasn't finished with his performance. As Rebecca and Trevor struggled to process what they'd witnessed, he activated the final phase of his plan. "There's something else," Victor said, his tone shifting to something more ominous. "While I was dealing with Torino, I found some interesting things on him. Photos, surveillance notes, detailed information about your daily routines." Victor pulled out a manila folder, placing it on the coffee table. "He knew things about you that were very specific. Meeting times, hotel rooms, private conversations. Almost like he'd been conducting professional surveillance." Trevor's face went white. "What kind of surveillance?" "The kind that's only necessary when someone has something to hide," Victor replied, his eyes moving between Rebecca and Trevor with predatory focus. The kind that might be valuable to someone conducting a detailed investigation into adultery. Rebecca's voice was barely a whisper. "Victor, what are you saying?" "I'm saying that Danny Torino wasn't just some random stalker," Victor replied, his smile cold and terrible. "He was very specifically interested in your affair, Rebecca. Your months-long affair with Trevor Mills." The silence that followed was deafening. Rebecca and Trevor stared at Victor in horror as the full scope of their situation became clear. Victor wasn't their protector. He was their predator. Danny Torino had never existed, and the man they betrayed had been orchestrating their terror from the very beginning. Chapter 8. The Truth Revealed. "You see," Victor continued, his voice carrying the calm certainty of a man who had planned every word, "Danny Torino was my creation. A fictional stalker designed to make you both feel helpless, paranoid, and dependent on my protection." Rebecca stumbled backward, her face pale with shock. "That's impossible." "The police reports," the detective. "Detective Santos received information from my contacts in law enforcement," Victor interrupted. Danny Torino's criminal record was meticulously crafted by people who specialize in creating false identities. Every incident, every threat, every moment of terror you experienced was orchestrated by me. Trevor's voice cracked. "You're lying? We saw him on the security cameras." "You saw shadows and suggestions," Victor replied. "Basic misdirection techniques I learned in psychological operations. The human mind fills in details when properly conditioned to expect threat." Victor moved to his desk and activated a hidden panel, revealing banks of monitoring equipment far more sophisticated than any civilian security system. Multiple screens showed recorded footage of Rebecca and Trevor's most intimate moments. Conversations in Trevor's apartment, their hotel encounters, private phone calls where they discussed their plans to destroy Victor's life. 12 hours of high-definition video, Victor announced. Audio recordings of every conversation where you discussed manipulating me, stealing my assets, and turning Emma against me in a custody battle. Rebecca's legs gave out, and she collapsed into a chair. "Victor, please." "Please what?" Victor's voice turned glacial. "Please forgive you for planning to destroy my relationship with my daughter. Please understand that you've been fucking another man in our bed while plotting to steal everything I've built." Trevor tried to edge toward the door, but Victor's movement cut him off with the fluid precision of a trained killer. "Trevor, you're not going anywhere," Victor said. "We're going to have a very detailed conversation about your history of targeting married women and your specific plans for my wife and my assets." "This is insane," Trevor protested. "You can't keep us here." "I can do whatever I want," Victor replied, his voice carrying absolute conviction. "You see, Danny Torino's final act was breaking into my house and threatening my family. When the police arrive tomorrow morning, they'll find evidence of a violent confrontation that ended with the intruder's disappearance." Victor smiled at their horror. "Of course, there will also be evidence that Danny Torino was specifically targeting adulterous couples, with particular focus on Rebecca and Trevor. Very detailed evidence of their affair, their plans to defraud me, and their conspiracy to manipulate custody arrangements." Rebecca began to cry, the sound harsh and desperate. "What do you want from us?" "I want you to understand exactly who you chose to betray," Victor replied. "I want you to realize that your mild-mannered husband is someone who has broken stronger people than you for far less serious offenses." Victor activated another screen, showing financial records that made Trevor gasp in recognition. Bank accounts, property transfers, debt arrangements. A complete picture of Trevor's fraudulent activities extending far beyond his relationship with Rebecca. "Trevor, your history of financial manipulation is quite extensive," Victor observed. "Forged documents, fraudulent loans, identity theft. Enough federal crimes to ensure a very long prison sentence." "You can't prove any of that," Trevor said, but his voice lacked conviction. "I can prove all of it," Victor replied. "Just like I can prove your conspiracy to defraud me, your plans to manipulate my daughter, and your systematic destruction of my marriage." Victor turned to Rebecca, his expression showing no trace of the love that had once existed between them. And you, my dear wife, will soon discover that adultery is the least of your problems. Conspiracy to commit fraud, child endangerment, perjury. By the time I'm finished, you'll be lucky to see Emma for supervised visits. You're talking about destroying our family, Rebecca whispered. No, Victor corrected. You destroyed our family the moment you decided to betray me. I'm simply making sure there are consequences. The room fell silent as Rebecca and Trevor absorbed the full scope of their situation. They had betrayed a man whose profession was destroying people, and now they were experiencing the full extent of his capabilities. Victor's smile was terrible in its coldness. The game is over. You lost the moment you thought you could deceive me. Now we discuss the terms of your surrender. Chapter 9. No Forgiveness. The final phase of Victor's plan unfolded with the precision of a military operation. As dawn approached, he revealed the complete scope of their predicament with methodical thoroughness. Rebecca, you have two choices, Victor announced, spreading legal documents across the coffee table. Option 1. Sign these divorce papers, agreeing to zero alimony, supervised visitation with Emma, and a full confession of your adultery and conspiracy. You'll leave this house with the clothes on your back and never contact Emma directly again. Rebecca stared at the documents in horror. You can't take my daughter from me. Option 2. Victor continued as if she hadn't spoken. I released the evidence to law enforcement, the State Bar Association, and your real estate licensing board. You face criminal charges for fraud and conspiracy, lose your professional licenses, and after serving your prison sentence, you'll be financially destroyed and legally barred from unsupervised contact with Emma anyway. Trevor tried to interrupt. This is extortion. Victor's laugh was utterly without humor. Trevor, you don't have choices. You have consequences. Victor activated a final screen showing Trevor's complete financial destruction in real time. Bank accounts frozen, credit destroyed, employment terminated, criminal charges filed with federal authorities. Your co-conspirators in previous fraud schemes have been contacted by federal investigators. Apparently, they're very eager to cooperate in exchange for reduced sentences. That's impossible, Trevor whispered. You can't have done all this overnight. I've been planning this for weeks, Victor replied. Every phone call you made, every digital transaction, every person you contacted in planning your scheme against me. I monitored all of it. While you thought you were hunting me, I was systematically destroying your entire life. Victor turned back to Rebecca with the cold focus of a predator delivering a killing blow. Emma will be told that Mommy chose to leave because she preferred her boyfriend to her family. She'll grow up knowing that you abandoned her for a man who helped you try to steal her college fund. Victor, please, Rebecca begged. She's your daughter too. Don't poison her against me. Emma is the only good thing that came from our marriage, Victor said, his voice carrying finality. I will protect her from the damage you've caused, and I will ensure she never makes the mistake of trusting someone like you. Victor's phone buzzed with a text message. He read it and smiled. Excellent timing. Detective Santos just confirmed that Danny Torino's criminal associates have provided information about his plans to target our family. The police are issuing a warrant for his arrest, though of course, he'll never be found. He looked at Rebecca and Trevor with satisfaction. The official story is that a violent criminal targeted your affair, escalated to home invasion, and disappeared after being confronted by armed resistance. Very clean, very believable. Victor handed Rebecca a pen. Sign the documents. Rebecca, accept exile with some dignity or be destroyed completely. Those are your only options. As Rebecca's hand shook while signing away her rights to her daughter and her marriage, Victor felt the satisfaction of perfect justice. She had chosen betrayal. Now she would live with consequences that matched the scope of her deception. Trevor was led away in handcuffs an hour later when federal agents arrived with warrants for his arrest on fraud charges. Victor watched from his window as his wife's lover was loaded into a government vehicle, beginning a journey that would end with a decades-long prison sentence. Emma returned from her sleepover to find her mother gone and her father explaining that Mommy had made some bad choices and wouldn't be living with him anymore. At 14, Emma was old enough to understand that her mother had chosen someone else over their family. "Will I see her again?" Emma asked. "That depends on her," Victor replied, knowing Rebecca would never risk the exposure that contact would bring. "But you'll always have me, sweetheart. I'll never leave you." That evening, Victor stood in his study, surrounded by the evidence of his victory. Rebecca's belongings were packed and removed, Trevor was in federal custody, and Emma was safely in his care. His enemies had been destroyed without mercy or chance for redemption. Victor felt no guilt, no regret, no possibility of forgiveness. Rebecca and Trevor had chosen to betray him, to steal from him, to destroy his relationship with his daughter. They had shown him no mercy in their planning. They would receive none in their punishment. The phone rang. Rebecca's voice, desperate and broken. "Victor, I'll do anything." Victor hung up and deleted her number. Rebecca had made her final play, a desperate attempt to frame him for domestic violence. But she had never understood who Commissioner Bradley Morse, Victor's former commanding officer, had personally ensured that Rebecca's false accusations would result in her own arrest for filing false reports and conspiracy. The 911 recording would show her coaching Emma, demonstrating premeditation that would destroy any remaining credibility. Emma would learn that her mother had tried to frame her father for violence he'd never committed. Rebecca would spend the next several years in prison, her reputation destroyed, her relationship with Emma permanently severed. Victor smiled as he locked his study for the night. Rebecca and Trevor had thought they were clever enough to deceive him, steal from him, and destroy his family. They had learned, too late, that some men could not be betrayed without consequences that would echo through the rest of their lives. There would be no reconciliation, no forgiveness, no second chances. Victor Holt was a man who never forgot and never forgave. And now Rebecca and Trevor would spend the rest of their lives remembering what happened when someone made the mistake of crossing him. Emma was safe. The threat was eliminated. And justice had been served with the cold precision of a man who understood that betrayal demanded destruction in return. The game was over. Victor had won completely, and his enemies would never recover from the devastating consequences of their own choices. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.